In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this mushroom bucket hat and these fairy wings. I based this hat off the Lorena bucket hat pattern, which you can download for free in the description box. Once it's printed off, I made sure that the pattern is scaled correctly by measuring the testing box. And if the box is 2 inches, you're good. And then next, I cut out the pattern pieces. I ended up adding extra seam allowance, but you don't need to if your head is 22 inches. And I also wanted to make the mushroom brim wider than a traditional hat. So after cutting out the 3 brim pieces, I'm adding 2 inches in length. But make sure you only expand the pattern where I do in length, because if you accidentally make the sides longer, then your cap won't match up with the brim and you'll have like a wonky hat. And you can test you've done it correctly by lining up the previous pattern on top of the new one. You should see that only the length of the pattern has changed. To assemble the pattern pieces, you want to attach the 3 brim pieces together. You can just use some tape, and then you should also have a triangle piece for the cap. Now to cut out the pieces, I take the outside fabric, the polka dot one, and I fold it in half. And then when I cut it out, there should be 3 cap pieces and then 1 brim piece. And that way, when it's unfolded, it means there will be double of all those. Then I repeat this with my interfacing, and this is optional because I'm going to be using cardstock later on. First I got out some tan lining fabric and folded it in half, then cut out 3 cap pieces, but I made sure to add about a ½ inch of seam allowance because we want the cap to be bigger than the outside one for later. To reinforce my brim piece, I cut out the same pattern for the brim with cardstock, and then I glued it onto my fabric piece that I cut out earlier. And I ended up using 2 layers to make it stiffer. And I also added wires on to hold its shape, and I attached them using duct tape. Then I put right sides together of the brim and sew it down, so when it's unfolded, it creates a nice circle. To make the cap piece, the top part of the head, we're going to put right sides together of 2 of the triangles and sew it down. And then add another triangle right sides together to those 2 pieces and sew it again. And then repeat this process with the other 3 pieces. And once you have those 2 sets, you want to sew them both right sides together. Then once the cap is complete, I iron down the seams and then did a decorative top stitch on the outside of the seam line. Then I line up the cap to the center of the brim and I attach it with pins about ½ inch all the way around, and I make sure the cap layer is on top. Then next I sewed where I pinned down, and I did 2 lines of stitches, and the first one I just did with the presser foot lined up to the edge, and then the next one I did really close to the edge so that you can't see any fabric lifting up, and also for extra security. Then to make the mushroom gills, I used a tan fabric and folded it in half. And I took my pattern piece and cut it out 3 times. And I'd make sure you have enough fabric to cut it out 6 times just in case you pleat different than me and then you end up running out of fabric. And after I cut out these pieces, I sewed them into one long strip. Then I took the fabric to the bottom of the hat and folded the piece towards the first one to make the pleat. And since mushroom gills are not perfectly even, I don't measure anything out for the pleats, and I just do it by eye, and then it has a more natural look. And once I made it all the way around the hat, I sewed all those pleats down with a straight stitch. And once that's done, I flip the gills around to the other side. Then I iron the lining cap edges the same way as we did the outer layer hat earlier. Then I pin down the cap to the pleats, making sure the cap layer is on top. And once this is done, I whipped out some fabric glue and attached the 2 pieces. And I don't sew this down with the sewing machine because I don't want the stitches to go through both layers. And since I plan on wearing the hat in the rain, I added some extra reinforcement by hand sewing, and I just did that one stitch I remembered from sewing class in middle school. And this way I can feel that I'm just attaching the 2 lining fabrics and not going through the entire hat. And that makes it complete. Now to create your wings, you're going to draw out the skeleton frame of where the wires are going to go. And then you're going to place wires wherever you drew out those lines using it as a guide. And when you need to connect 2 wires, you can just use duct tape or electrical tape because we're going to be painting over the wires later, but you could also use clear tape. Next, because my wire is weak, I need to strengthen the base. So I got my wire and folded it about 4 times and wrapped it with electrical tape. And now I'm attaching it along the side of the wings, and I'm using tape as well and hot glue gun. If you want the wings to be strapless, make sure that your strengthening wire is longer than your wings so you can use it as a stand. And then I'm attaching it to a square piece of cardboard that I'm using as a backplate with some hot glue gun and duct tape. Now I'm painting all the wires with some acrylic paint, and if it doesn't attach to the wire easily, I suggest using gesso first because it will make it easier for the paint to show up. After that, I'm cutting out 2 layers of cellophane, and then I'm attaching my wires to it. I recommend using some kind of spray glue, but I tried using white glue, and that didn't work as well. And then I also tried using just an Elmer's glue stick, and that worked a bit better. And when you're attaching the wire, you want to sandwich it between the 2 pieces of cellophane. Now to make the wings look even more magical, I'm using cellophane again and doing 2 layers, except I'm using iridescent cellophane this time and just gluing it on. And now is for the part that I found most fun in the project, cutting out the wings. So I just cut out through all 4 layers of cellophane about 1/2 inch around the wire, and you can get creative and really make the shape come to life here. Next, I ironed down the wings, and this made the wire pop out more as well as give a cool texture to the wings. And while I was doing this, I made sure to check them repeatedly because it's really easy to burn the plastic in this process. And then lastly, after I ironed both of the wings, I just added some paint details along the outside where the wire was to give it some more depth and color. And then they're all done. And how to put them on is just to tuck them in either a corset or your pants. And then you won't see anything but the wire sticking out.